den jambe yong ma cha sa bu kang ge lu de dim ye den ye dra nam da rap sa ve jin ye den ge men ji jian zai ni je tu gra le wang zai kong da si be zhen ri ma ri men tam dong e ji ze ve zhuo zui gun la bu jie da yin lai zhu ju yong dian song zhu de che zhu ni mo ni lu le jie jiao zhuan zhu zai jian ma ri men se le dong ren yu gu qian ye xuan ze ra zhe nam dene da yin sa ju da yuan den lu zuo jia se tu yu gu xun zha ju dong ju ni yin zhe da le men jiang bei yong la yan du zai den qi jie qian ra yu zi le jie da le de mo men ba ra sa ne ga dang den ju yong lu do hua ye lu zhe bo be nong a za du so lu do bie chao wan nam zi le xian sa dan jia xie gong a wa gun du zang be si le cha gun ne zhuo la yin gui sha ca le jia mian xia na lu jie jin re zi sa yin nin bo de ba nam ba sa nam ke nin bo shang ba gun du zang ye yue se jin jie sha jie wu ca le gun du si jie da nie le tam ge sam me sha ge yong zong xin shang jim nin be lam ken karma ba me che de be ji we zu ge du la so tene samba shang ju cho du tu je par mo se sal tam ne chue sen ro nang.
Please begin by generating the body-mind in a clear and precise manner.
Ta ka sang an zo shine gambe rambat ma shu de re ti na ne chap mi pa de ro char song.
So yesterday the methods for setting the mind, the various objects of observation, part of the segment which sets forth the various objects of observation were explained yesterday. There was the kind of object of observation or object of meditation, however one wants to phrase it, called pervasive objects, and that one has been explained yesterday, that category of objects. The next is the category of objects where the aim is to, by way of the object of meditation, purify the mind of deeds that in this life make for a predisposition of a specific or a predominant afflictive obscuring state in terms of the individual. Of course, any given individual, his mindset will be one of all afflictive obscuring states, but he will be predisposed to engage in one or two, perhaps more than, or give rise to one or two, perhaps more than any of the other afflictive obscuring states. And that originates with having enacted the specific afflictive obscuring state to a great deal in previous lives, so that in this lifetime the personality of the individual will primarily be colored by that state.
Tati inde 딱 가장 세럽마 더샤라 셰시르 제베 바샤라 땐 센들라 더샤슈 쳔부연 켄게 더샤그 넘버 똑같은 곳 넘버 체도 미둑바 감바당 기르그 넘버 감발라서 파티 슈차르레.
So the first object of observation mentioned, which has the purpose of remedying desire attachment, is an object which induces in the mind of the meditator repulsion, i.e. the opposite of attachment desire. Example, the focusing on the skeletal frame of a dead body, as well as other objects of observation. The common denominator, though, is to induce a sense of repulsion for the object one is, or the mind is preoccupied with, in order to counteract the great extent of desire attachment that one has in this life, that is part of one's mindset in this life, because of having engaged in or enacted desire attachment extensively in previous lifetimes. Thus, one in this life is predisposed, as it were, to be involved in desire attachment to a great extent.
다 근소 감베수 십차 되네 켄주다 타르징게 난 십차 송고요. 오다 근소 제나베서 벨로라고 난 톰나 야부요래. 타르징양에 타고는 티베레 엘라티 유선배 켄주 델라당 디지 코르데 타고니갈 티요래. 켄주 이나서 소해레. 디지 코티로 켄주 티바.
Kangi korsomri.
Dembaye.
There are in particular two texts which set forth quite some detail regarding meditation in the context of counteracting desire, attachment, and other afflictive, obscuring states. These two are the Dual Ornament of Liberation, authored by Gambopa, as well as entering the path of or engaging in the deeds of learning or scholarship, which makes for the practitioner developing skill in terms of his efforts on the path. Now, that text is authored by Mipam the First, and Khenpo Rinpoche taught a portion of it, the portion which sets forth the Four Noble Truths, here in the center of Vienna, and he has taught a great deal of that text, more than just the segment which sets forth the Four Noble Truths at Dakpo Kodjeling, and the Dual Ornament he also has taught at Dakpo Kodjeling. So there would be some material perhaps that people could use in order to find out more about these various objects of observation.
Tene 다 셰동 셰체비 리진텔라 셰동 때마 고는 베체도 삼베땡인지 감체.
Then there are individuals who have what one may refer to as an angry disposition. Anger, hatred or aversion is the afflictive, obscuring state which is predominant. In modern day language, this type of person is referred to as a person who has an anger management problem, as it were. And the antidote to be focused upon one pointedly in order to remedy that afflictive, obscuring state is that of loving kindness.
셰동 세계의 컨디션이 제기도 쓰이다. 미두빠지 일로 코르네. 셰동
미두빠지라 코르네.
이도 명화지 셈라 코르네. 셰동도 제고도. pen me yenda china ko ngal sik duk ja thinde chlap chong do pore sam yamena nga pe chobo yin thang nga re kim do ende re ma song mende re ma song tene te sema chi ge cha tini she dong che ge she dong sikit.
In terms of anger, hatred, this affliction very often results from a dislike of something or someone. One may encounter a person one has a dislike for, and because of the encounter, thoughts of dislike in the connection with the individual at hand arise in the mind. And the more one thinks about the perceived unpleasant perspectives that one has of this person, the more angry one gets. Anger in this way escalates. Also, it may be that the aversion at hand is directed towards oneself. One feels like a failure. One feels or sees oneself as a person who hasn't really succeeded with this or that. Meaning, one feels like a failure. And the more one gives thought to this, the angrier one gets about the situation one is in. So these are then examples of how anger arises and then snowballs into a higher and higher level of it.
Tene sampe sem sengente yitu wala mikbe sambachre.
Now, loving kindness is a mindset, or loving kindness is what one can term a pleasant mindset. The opposite of anger, hatred.
Dorna te kodevushuna tachi sem chipochik la mitne samba sengente jegi. Perna michi la juno longche pyonsam sobajindu kochibu che den atile sem macho acha ase kalwa sangbare samsam tawchi.
An example would be to rejoice in the good circumstances of someone else, someone who has good circumstances such as good finances, good reputation, good health, and the like. Now, that mindset of rejoicing in the good fortune of someone else on the basis of loving kindness for that individual is what one may call a pleasant mindset. The opposite of anger, hatred.
Then, ta Quran de Yong Boyade, Jawang, Tangaras Nambachi in Bichane, Jawang Mamma Quran Sonam Gutsosa, but then Shomare, De Yakushirare, Ta Jawan Di and the Yanku Mille Pembata Yakuchi Chene, Yaku Yomasho, some the matter what you go with.
So, as a Buddhist, one would understand that the person in question has acquired these good circumstances because of the merit he has accumulated in connection with virtuous deeds. And knowing that, it should be easy to rejoice in his good fortune, knowing that this individual has done good, he deserves good circumstances, as it were. And perhaps this person is, in this life, someone who helps others, who assists others in various ways because of being predisposed to do so, having acted in this way in previous lives, and therefore having good circumstances to do the same, or having the good circumstances needed to do the same in this lifetime.
Then Tagana think wrong in a young Tene Tajo Mamala Rank Sunam Chosa Valaten, me Lutop. Then Nambachi Sanje Chödrak. Then Tatanda Rangichi say, Good, Namala Sopayang, Ran Dong Shepachi, Takalba Samne. Then go gum to go.
And in terms of the person who is angry about his situation right now, feeling like a failure, that can be remedied by contemplating the good circumstances that one does have as a human being. A rebirth as a human being in and of itself is a good circumstance. And in terms of a person who has encountered Buddhism, by way of this, his life has meaning in that Buddhism will teach him about the path to enlightenment and how to improve further, which again results in so-called merit, which contributes towards a good rebirth and the like. And if one is a person who has adequate provisions in terms of food, clothing, housing, and the like, rather than feeling angry about not having achieved this or that, one could rejoice in the fact that, well, after all, things are not as bad as I've imagined, because I have adequate food, clothing, housing, and the like, and rejoice in those good circumstances. Instead of thinking of having failed to achieve certain things that one would have wanted to achieve.
Today, some tongue, Mashev on the tongue, Kangal, the Jang, the short of some tongue,
Kangal Tang?
Tang, I can dare Chumas on day, Chumas on day, Chumas, some tongue, Devina. The Tamche Shon Devachi, Corban on the Yegma, the son.
Point made is there is no one in the world or in any other world system who has achieved all what he wanted to achieve. That simply does not happen in the context of the regular world. Therefore, to sit around and be angry about not having achieved certain things is rather pointless, as there isn't a single individual who does achieve each and everything he would have liked to achieve.
Penna Bodhisattva Chare Avatara no Songru Yorba Gave Yigne
Karaji?
Gave Yik Sem Gabo de Yik Gave Yigne Trugmija Songat. Gave Yik the Trugmashawache
De Pa Nga De Katsu Yapundula Sopa Digi
Yik the Trugmashason.
Gave de la Kogo.
Yes, yes.
So the mindset which takes joy in the good circumstances that one does have, Shantideva says in his Bodhicharya Avatara, is not to be perturbed. That is to say, by thoughts of anger as to not having gotten all that one wanted to get, as it were. So one has to take care to not, for example, be jealous of the good fortune of others. Instead, cultivate the mindset which rejoices on the basis of loving and compassion in the good fortune of others. Then there is individuals where the predominant obscuration is that of a dense or thick mindset, an obscured mindset, as it were. Some individuals explain this to refer to someone who likes to sleep a lot, that sleep would be the state listed here, but that's not correct, Khenpo Rinpoche explains. What is meant is not knowing what the right thing to do is. Namely, one is obscured, one is dense, one is thick, one doesn't get the point, and therefore acts in a way counterproductive to progress on the path to enlightenment and otherwise too. So the remedy here is to acquire learning of the various stages of the process of dependent occurrence, both the outer perspective of it and the inner perspective of it. Tene? Tama one acquires knowledge of this specific topic till one knows it well, and then engages in contemplative meditation with respect to what one has learned about this process.
Penna Tinjin Jamgön Kongtrül Lodrö Thaye Ngazo Korwala Kande Saturbiyo Ti lu korwa pung kona ludog tender the kande yimbatanzo kanga she.
On the basis of this, both learning and contemplative meditation, the practitioner acquires a comprehensive knowledge of the workings of samsara, as well as how to reverse the workings of samsara, so that liberation from endless rebirths in worldly existences ends.
Tene tang ngajalla che bashe che kongza tenzo la kamji rabye sengit songote.
Then we have individuals who predominantly are of a proud disposition.
Tene ta kam jobye ta kam tukjure yise la so songshaba ti chulla sanna che tang bayina te ngajal chewe nga sengite mani wa chao.
This kind of person is advised to engage in studies and contemplation regarding what a so-called individual is made up of, as it were. And as was mentioned in brief yesterday, you have two basic lists here, one with 18 items and one with 64. Now, the purpose of both is to make the practitioner see that the person does not truly exist, that instead of a truly existent individual, there is but no self. That would remedy pride.
Then
you have the kind of person who, one could perhaps say, analyzes, thinks, and so on excessively, making for a perturbed mindset in terms of not being able to rest very much in a calm state, not from the perspective of shamatha meditation particularly, but rather preventing the person from being calm and collected, as it were.
Tande penangone kongsa gari kashele ti yong degidowa semkenam pentra mendra kordikinch.
Some people have a very active intellect. That's just a fact.
Yeah. Ta shochi le na che chen tuba de yakore la sho xin xi ne de na zhen ju mang cha na tene jiu chun yo.
This can be an advantage. However, the downside of it, perhaps, is that it's difficult for the person, this type of person, to perhaps remain calm and collected when necessary, in terms of how the individual deals with other people, situations, and so on. So there is both an advantage and a disadvantage with respect to this type of disposition.
Tande namto sheche kongsa la unjing lam bipate chunde ni de tekpane songte di gotsubare.
Now the remedy here is that of one-pointed attention of the coming and going of the breath, a method taught throughout the various divisions of Buddhism, starting with the Shravaka path.
Penna nampo kar chona yang yuwa tang cheba jirwa.
Any thought, good or bad, makes for some perturbation as to the state of the mindset. Thoughts make for perturbation.
Yuwa tang cheba jire yuwa te la thara mungu shirayo.
Of course, you have a wide range of levels of perturbation or mental movement, as it were. This one should be clear about.
Tangaranso ugla mikbaten gamyon de yuwa tang cheba rakpa chigne ngotsupar gamtangte. Rakpa te gamne, rakpa te ma...
Rakpa de gomne sungen va. Rakpa de kanglang o she gomne.
Rakpa te gambe ting cheong ya, rakpa korang gamba ma de, u pa tong su ngwe te nga zo yunden yue da warwa. Te trawe ke u gun rotang te la mikpa te ne. Yen tu zane mikpa yen la yen ma sholo chi nanda.
O drebo de yova rakpa de gi nyempo chagre dangpo sungenuge.
Mare.
Rakpa de kawa jargo genu.
Rakpa te u jingup che chi warwa.
Lare.
Diche tang sinang nanda shige lung juwa te rakpa re ko. Tawa marwa.
Chirtang tong ne rakpa re.
Rakpa re.
Ore chi de ya.
Rakpa te pejo tang ne, te la mikpa te ne, rakpa te chuk ma shoro che de kale te namto te shiung.
Now, in terms of the process of breathing, what characterizes the regular process of breathing as we know it, which is the more gross type of movement, the movement involved in breathing out and breathing in. The movement in the context of this, namely breathing in and out, is something that makes for movement in the mind and in the physical body. The support tela yang yova chik yong yore, semla yang yova chik yong yore. So, in terms of focusing on the grosser perspective of movement in the context of breathing in and out, the more one-pointed attention the practitioner can achieve, the higher the level of his one-pointed attention of breathing in and out, the more subtle that process will be. So the process of breathing in and out itself is affected positively by way of the one-pointed attention, which in turn has the consequence of pacifying thought processes in the mindset, so that perturbation because of an overly active intellect is also affected, or affected positively, namely the excessive level of thoughts as to the intellect is affected, is reduced. So both body and mind will be more balanced in effect of doing this type of meditation properly.
Lasso de nyomun nam jongge Japan number jong tengen zain song kedin sare.
Yeah, so here then that concludes the segment of the text which sets forth the details of various objects of observation or meditation.
Perna del Japan number jongwa sade ngaranso lu nga yigi chepate nyomun kan shukchena dewantu ndrowe nyenga yorwa.
Lunga yisum gi köpa karejina yang. Tene?
Nyomun kare shukchena dewantu ndrowe nyenga yorwa ngazol.
Sikti kogi nu dik.
Ben charan.
Mari ne kan di shuju derela. Lunga yisum yorwa. Da det som nangle lyina ra ngayina ra yina ra det dang drelvei nyen mong kang shuk chena tene
Di wang robi nyenga yorwa.
Wong tu droken semra va.
Rodkin semre.
Ja.
Den semla denne du dang nganye di wang dro yung gorwa.
Da den du shu våg marveona. Da det gila njönmong karrekorna dela tenne lydang ngagi dedang drelve köpa chik jungiore den det chik kogogen du kan det chik kogogen
zere te yina nge chitra shuge
laso
penna nge yi kisegen zo sim te sarchi rikpa samre ko luma ding da uchrwa
lare
ta te game gete geve semjong ton me geve semjong ton zo kha jurung gudwa
ta ngachunga chik den so
ya ta me geve semjong on chara chewa ma mando sha la yang ne yang do kam deve me chi yina
mi geva o de
me gewa do sha la kam deve chi yina ta da nge chen de ge ten do do sha shuk che ge yarwa
yes
do sha shuk che de nge lu nga yi dang che pa ten do sha go on do shor do
yes
다 디 장고고 여러마도 데 마장나 실하기 등은 지용 답이요 말와
in terms of the second category as to the various categories of objects of meditation, the objects for purifying deeds, Khenpo Rinpoche explains the following. Deeds is a word which here refers primarily to past deeds. Past deeds which will influence the individual to the extent where he in this life will continue to enact the same type of deeds. In terms of a person, you have to consider three perspectives: words, thoughts, and deeds, physical deeds. Sometimes translated as body, speech, and mind. However, in this context, one would perhaps speak of the words of the person, the thoughts of the person, and the deeds referring to the physical deeds of the person. Now, In terms of the so-called mind, you have a number of perspectives. A very simplified version would be the following, namely the basic mind stream, which is the primary perspective, which, as was explained yesterday, is a continuous stream of vivid and knowing instances. And the basic mind stream is neutral in terms of answering the question, is the mind stream of a virtuous nature or a non-virtuous nature? Well, neither. It is of a neutral nature. The basic mind stream is simply a continuous stream of vivid and knowing instances in terms of virtue and non-virtue arising in the mind of someone. That brings us to what is called mental events. You have a number of them, and they are divided into the categories, if we follow a very simple presentation, of virtuous mental events and non-virtuous mental events. And depending upon behavior in previous lifetimes, an individual will be predisposed to act either in a virtuous manner or a non-virtuous manner. If we take the example of desire attachment, this is a non-virtuous mental event or mental factor, however one wants to phrase it. And if that specific factor or working of the worldly mindset is predominant because of having enacted desire attachment to a great extent in previous lifetimes, then the person will be predominantly of this disposition. So his basic mind stream is, as it were, colored by this non-virtuous mental factor or working of the mindset, the worldly mindset. And once there is the presence of desire attachment to the extent where it's predominant, the individual will enact a desirous behavior in terms of his words, thoughts, and deeds. So this working of the worldly mindset is what then triggers various types of behavior: angry behavior, desirous behavior, stupid behavior, and the rest. And here the point of the meditation is to counteract, to begin with, the predominant afflictive obscuring state, which makes for a person behaving in one way or the other.
Hola, so tate nyomo kangu chopa namjong chitengen zahen che. Ti jetana sumbate kepe mikba sungketere.
Then you have the third type of objects, being objects that render skillful.
Ta kepe mikba sungketere pena ta kenju dawajir chachun bayena Khenpo Kam Jenche Tender Nedan Nemain Bade Ta Dineng Atel Ge Tenda Hakona Ne Ngabutilla Kevach Chabina Tengone Da Ribun Zamba Da Jigdun Zamba Da Shepapurun Zamba Lo Lucy
Da Jigdun Zamba, tene?
Da Shepapurun Zamba
Da Chepapurun Bachirta Mirtan.
Ja.
Ngaran and the Chik
Ja.
Chicken Ngarayan.
Chicken Ngarayan something that Yan Planda with Chiki on something. Tende Zentang number along.
Here the list of 5 objects of observation is the following. You have the skandhas, the 5 psychophysical constituents of an individual. You have the dhatus and the ayatanas. You're probably familiar with the Sanskrit names. Being the first 3 of the 5, number 4 is the process of dependent occurrence, and number 5 has 2 perspectives, the appropriate and the inappropriate. So these are the names of the 5 objects of observation, set forth in detail in Khenpo Rinpoche's text referred to earlier. And the effect of developing one-pointed attention of these 5 objects of observation is manifold. What's remedied? Well, the notion of the individual as a single entity, there being a single self within, as it were. That notion is remedied. Also, the notion of oneself as the creator of something, or the founder of something, however one wants to phrase it, that one is the primary source of something else. So that's a general context in the world. This perspective also includes remedying the notion of a creator in the shape and form of a god and the like.
That's all. What I give at the desong hisare.
Shipa?
Kazan subject Yana song, Kaingo, Chape Mikbaki Chick, Japan Namjongi Ni, Kepe Mikbak Sum, Sum Che, nyomu jongma de ye song song.
Now, the fourth of the four categories listed here in terms of various types is about the objects for purifying afflictive, obscuring states.
Tan desong de day
Ja,
sa.
det är köpa namnjong. Det är köpar andra va?
Yeah.
If we go back to the objects for purifying deeds, it may sound very similar to you. However, there, as was mentioned, the primary target is to change the individual's behavior in the context of those afflictive, obscuring states.
Woman di kalden desong de yosare.
And that would evidently involve with overcoming the states themselves. However, the target is to prevent oneself from enacting these afflictive, obscuring states.
Woman di kalden desong de yosare. Pan di nyomu de nyomu rapat le songa yisamare. Perna Dosim Chikbala, things in ne de do. Tatung Nanking is something to come by some day or what.
Larry?
Zukam Peg the Lamigum to Tiang some Mashua.
Oh, the Charagi
Rembati Sade.
You will now discover, in terms of explaining the fourth category, that it's quite different from afflictive, obscuring states themselves and the actions because of them, and the context of afflictive, obscuring states as to the fourth category. Because here, as to the fourth category, you have, as was also explained in brief yesterday, in terms of different types of existence or segments of a world system, you have a so-called impure world system can be divided into three segments, as it were: the desire realm, the realm of form, and the realm of no form. And as was explained yesterday, the higher you go in terms of these three segments, the less perturbation, the more of a calm state. And here, in terms of afflictive, obscuring states, the primary target is the states themselves. So here the context starts at the level of a one-pointed state in the desire realm. So you have a practitioner who has achieved the capacity to rest in a calm state. He is taught to compare that state with the level of calm in or on the various levels of the realm of form. And in consequence of this analysis, he will find that his calm state could be called a state of some perturbation when compared to the calm state in the realm of form, for example. And the process here in terms of the practice is to compare the various levels of calm to the next, going through all of these in order to understand that the higher are more peaceful and the lower are more coarse in terms of the level of calm. So, point made here is you see, the purpose of these objects of observation is to make clear to the practitioner that in order to be able to properly engage in vipassana meditation, he needs to attain the level of calm found on the fourth level of the realm of form. Anything else would not be a proper basis for acquiring insight of mind's true nature. So calm at that level would be the right basis for vipassana meditation. So the analysis here, or the contemplation, or the meditation, however one wants to phrase it, the purpose of it is this, to make this very clear to the practitioner, so that he has an inner experience of, at least, what level of calm is needed in order to be able to make progress in vipassana meditation. The very minimum, of course, that's the preferable level. It may be that some practitioners are not able to get there in this lifetime. However, there are other options, and the very minimum would be the highest level of one-pointedness in the desire realm. That would be the bare minimum as a basis for successfully engaging in vipassana meditation. Now, in terms of key instructions, there is a tradition where that's emphasized. It is explained that in dependence upon this specific tradition and its key instructions, it is possible for practitioners in the desire realm to achieve the highest level of one-pointedness within the realm, the desire realm. The late Jamgön Kongtrül Lodrö in this context said the following. Yeah. As a young child, sort of 8, 9, in terms of him acquiring various skills as to the Buddhist scriptures, he would train to some extent in shamatha meditation during this period of his education.
lai nai ngö she lai mi ngö she singen de zo shine gi sem ji yö na double la ure se gigin zan go song song.
He had heard his teacher say that if shamatha is developed to higher levels, then the practitioner will achieve so-called, what is popularly named clairvoyance. This individual would be able to know various perspectives, such as the thoughts of others to some extent and the like. And sense perception would augment to a higher level, where sounds at a far distance could be heard, and so on the basis of this mindset of one-pointedness.
Tene shine gi sem ge ne sha de tempo ro ji cha yu de. Tene lai na wen ngö she la kung bi ba te ba yin song to.
Apparently, he achieved the ability to hear sounds in higher existences, the existences of the so-called gods or divine beings.
And
he could hear conversations between people at quite some distance, a kilometer or two.
And
the more focused the state became, the further away he could, for example, hear conversations between people at a far distance. At the time he had a personal, he had, as people of his status, a personal attendant, and the personal attendant at the time had at one point gone to visit Lhasa. And his teacher has, the attendant had left, and if it was later on that day or another day, the story doesn't tell. However, it would have taken some time to travel on a horseback to Lhasa from the monastery. And his teacher had one day sort of said, "Wonder if he's going to arrive in Lhasa today." Apparently was wonder if he's returning from Lhasa today, and the young incarnate had said to his teacher, "Yes, he will, because I heard the bell that's tied to the horse's neck ring at such and such a place earlier today, and the distance is now so short, he would make it back today." And there would have been approximately 15 kilometers between him and the personal attendant returning at that when the personal attendant who was returning was at the place in question where the bell tied around the horse's neck had been heard by the young incarnate.
giging cha ma song song.
However, his teacher didn't pay much attention to what he had said. Perhaps he didn't believe it, we do not know.
Then Jema Shafit Tata Le Song Song.
However, his personal attendant did return that day.
Then Gana Song the Kong. That is your condition, she John.
So his teacher had then asked him, "How did you know this?"
Then Shine Gamba in the Cheva is a logic chasan.
And then the young incarnate had told his teacher the whole story about how he had trained in shamatha meditation in order to achieve what one may perhaps call heightened perception.
One thing, Yana Song those that in that son Gamma, they Chara Jackson ni Tong Gray, they Yakuchun Yoma Song.
And his teacher had said, "Stop all of this, it's not a good thing. You may end up making up things, and that's no good. So stop those efforts." The teacher had told him, of course, any person who makes the efforts required will achieve this. Suse? And Chödrak Rinpoche, when Khenpo Rinpoche had met with him on one occasion, at which point the Rinpoche was an old man and had told him this story, he had added, "And you too," he had said to Khenpo Rinpoche, "don't try this, nowadays this sort of thing brings no good. It's much better to focus on acquiring the right view, that of emptiness." Point made in telling all of this, Khenpo Rinpoche explains, is if one makes the efforts, it is attainable, these types of heightened perception and the like. However, some people may think, well, why haven't I, because of the efforts I made? Answer is very simple, you haven't made enough effort. What you've done is simply not sufficient. Anyone can do it.
Internet
Well, apparently, on the net, you have people regarded as scholars in Tibetan Buddhism who make statements such as, in today's world, it's not possible to accomplish higher or the highest level of shamatha meditation. This is not true, Khenpo Rinpoche says. Khenpo Rinpoche refers to himself, saying he's not a special person. However, he knows that if he set his mind to acquiring these sort of qualities and enacted the efforts needed to get there, he would get there. It's not impossible to achieve shamatha meditation in today's world.
Lasso, Tandela Damchi Javare. Taki neg ramba yihye yavate rambare, Chin Rogus and a tin rogumare sonate. Consa Ranange.
And then at the end of this part of the text, it is explained that in terms of an individual practitioner, it's not necessary for the individual practitioner to make use of all types of object of observation. One doesn't have to practice all of them in order to develop as to one-pointed attention.
Lasso, ta, Kazan Luji Yaktab on Semji Yaktab Nine, Semji Yaktab Tela, Mi Pachi Namjatan, Shedra Gamberan by Nine, Mi Pachi Namjat Tsarri, Tati in Chuck.
So, what has been given today is the part which sets forth objects of observation in a general manner, and the segment of the text began with the posture of the physical body while meditating, and then you have the next part, which is about the methods for the mind being set in a calm state in conjunction with objects of observation. And in terms of the objects of observation part of the text, what we've gone through till now is a segment that sets forth objects of observation in general.
Chödrak Gamberan Bahe Patala, Tanasi Sabje Sum Yungdo.
Next, the text goes into the progression of the actual meditation.
Tela Sum.
And here you find three subdivisions. Just a second, where are we? Shaktabra.
No, Chödrak Jatabla, Tinsa Yogo. Or Jede, Tomara or Redo. Yeah, patient, to see what the
La.
Jaldedam, a patient in Dragon.
Dragamilu? Did a type capture very well.
Alan did it.
No, Tulkashidu.
And yet,
Nipa Chödrak Gomrim Moeshepa. Det nipa då är sumpa som gilmare.
Nipari.
Dampo lygi shakta kan.
Luji Yatab the Tsarne, Semji Yatab like Ni.
So, in terms of body and mind, while meditating, you have the posture, and secondly, the mind and what happens in the mind simply. And here you have two parts. The first we went through, which set forth different objects of observation and the purposes of these objects of observation. Next, or the next segment, sets forth explanations about Digi kedi tonge mendushi. Kan resena dangpo telarava den so shi tela migul shi tanda rotsarva. Migul shi tanda ten chengi gi juldan ten medan den så det chikpa som det sigmato tonge mendu. Chepar kan det chikobo.
Chepar de koma den så jeta doju zone song bege Rinpoche redo tan dela sheta to ngarang su chi cancer hine gamkin chi gngone shena dereche gamna yan digre soya da ujin sare
Kaka ni re minduga ni chan mi yulgi ko redo tenit Chödrak gi kain koinge goma tsere tanda
kongna la maheba de sheda gambramba de shena song sare pen kong ne nyomu meba soya ta kebe mikpa ta chabe mikpa la so mikpa so su she so dan de ne pena mikpa sheda ba she ong do wa tenche teme ngoni som
ni cha mikpa re do ba
mikpa da re kanga mikpa re shene mikpa chin chang chang do ba
la re
mikpa yimbe chane chikpa
teni chepar
kare resena penna nyomu namjong ina nyomu miksewa chigi nyambo tenge do wa tan dene tendre ge yawa meba che sem shiwar ne tham bashi gen she
in the category we've gone through the objects of observation listed each has a specific purpose in terms of acting as an antidote for specific afflictive obscuring states, for example. Next, we also have a list of objects of observation. However, not in the specific connection of these objects of observation acting as an antidote for a specific afflictive obscuring state.
Da tela dene nansegi sum yagu yosade.
And here, in the next segment of the text, there are 3 subdivisions.
That sum gnana tungbo de tenche la lapa sakde.
The first of the 3 is about what is called setting the mind with a concrete support. And the word support is a reference to the object of meditation or the object of observation. Its independence upon the object at hand, that the mind can be set in a one-pointed state of mind. So it's about various objects of observation by way of which one-pointedness can be developed and achieved.
Penna la tungbo madak patin chen la lo song de madak pa sei kwe madak pa de shimbu sorjo as shin de chen no so mo ye yang gi shin gi tur chen de sha tilla mi pa te de.
So a concrete support is a physical support. And in the beginning, it's important to train using a support. And one begins with an so-called an impure support or object of observation. Now, that is a reference to any small object. Such as a piece of wood that wouldn't be larger than the width or length, however, the width rather, of 4 fingers. Or a pebble. Meaning?
Meaning do ta do inanda shin inanda tenzo shinang du yebe duntin tenzo thong debe sonjo.
Now, in terms of a high level of one-pointedness, the perception of the concrete support here, either a small piece of wood or a pebble, would change in consequence of the one-pointed attention at hand, to the extent where actual perspectives, not previously seen or known, are seen, such as dultren den så tonggeore mare de songgeore ve
dultren yang tonggeore ko kechik ma yimba yang tonggeore me pa kamta chana
such as seeing the process of constant change that any object is about. If we take the small piece of wood, the small piece of wood is made of many subtle material particles, atoms and subatomical particles. And these particles are in constant movement. That is not seen by a person who has not achieved a high level of one-pointed attention. Here, that is what happens. The higher the level of one-pointed attention, the greater the extent to which the practitioner actually sees the movements of those subtle material particles, thus seeing that the piece of wood that previously seemed very solid and real is but a process of constant change. So that's all for today.
Sunum de ye dam je zagwan ye pam na ye be danam pam che je ga na je ba la tru ba sik be chot le ro wa shu. That's all.